It's time to get sexy, so watch Secular Sexuality live Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTSS and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callsex.
Welcome back to another episode of The Nonprofits. The Nonprofits is the show where we discuss news, topics of the day from a skeptical, humanist perspective. My name is Nate Smith. Today's show, folks, today we have a special treat for you because it is a Secular Sexuality Valentine's Day invasion. However, unlike most invasions, we will not be pillaging resources and spreading disease today. What we're going to be spreading is information and respect for love in all its forms. First up, on my far opposite, is the man who gave me my ACA start on his very own show almost 1 year ago exactly. I don't know if you remember, but say hello, Christy Powell.
Hey, howdy. I'm excited to be here. When I was a child, I always wanted to grow up to become the sex therapist that a bunch of atheists wanted to talk about love with. It's just a dream come true.
Oh, lovely. Well, I'm glad to have you. And I think this is our first nonprofit show together,
Yeah, absolutely.
the V-Day special. So I hope you brought protection. Just saying, play safe. Next up is the Secular Sexuality Supernova, who is always up for a good time. Welcome back, Laura Magee.
Hello, hello, hello. I am super excited to be here, especially for this particular episode.
Yeah, this is going to be great. I've been on several ACA shows with both of you, and we've always got plenty to talk about. It's always a good time. Before we get into it, I wanted to ask you guys if you have a favorite Valentine's Day gift that you've ever received. If you had to pick one, is there something that stands out in your mind? Something special, perhaps?
Yeah, I'm
that
going to
you're
skip through this one and this one and this one because I don't want to offend YouTube. But like my number 12 favorite Valentine's gift ever was a home brewing kit. So if anybody
Ooh.
ever wants to drink like really shitty beer, my place is now the place to do it.
Hey, sign me up. How about you, Laura?
So, my lowest love language is gift giving, and gifts are just super unimportant to me. So, I can't even think, other than like the generic stuff, I can't think or recall over the years the different gifts that I've gotten. But what my husband and I do, and we've been together for a heck of a long time, is we just plan something special together. So, we'll do like a couple nights at a hotel or go to the hot springs or something. So, so to me, it's that time spent together that I think
Mm.
is so special, and the time away from the children. That's so
Mm.
so great.
Yes, as a father of three myself, I definitely appreciate some alone time is greatly appreciated. And
Oh,
like
yeah.
Christy, if I were to list off my favorite Valentine's Day gift, I would have to wait until Thursday when Secular Sexuality airs live, 5 p.m. Central. Um, so aside from that, we do have a bit of a tradition. My partner and I have been together almost 11 years. And what we like to do is we like to go through, and I know I'm aging myself here, but we like to go through Facebook memories and we like to look at like the last year and stuff we've done
Hmm.
and look at different photos and sort of reminisce about the what we've been up to.
Aw,
And then
yeah.
occasionally it turns into like a Festivus thing where it's like the airing of grievances. And
Daring.
it's like, I got a lot
Remember
of
when I got
problems.
pissed off at you about that thing?
Yeah, I
That's
knew that
right.
this was
Still
too
mad.
sweet. Yeah, okay, that's the American Valentine's Day that I know and love. That always like
Yeah.
devolves into some sort of argument.
Yeah, but you know what? Hey, sometimes you need to get stuff off your chest, and if you can do that, I mean, ain't nothing wrong with some makeup sex afterwards, right? Am I
I mean,
am I
sometimes that's
right,
the best
folks?
reason to argue. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
Sometimes I pick
Um,
fights just for the great sex afterwards.
Yeah. Oh my.
I don't
Oh wow.
know.
Wow.
No.
So another special treat for you folks. At the end of the episode, the three of us will be doing an a cappella version of the Righteous Brothers' Unchained Melody for all of you. Uh, I'm getting a message. Okay, I've been asked not to sing copyrighted information on
Oh.
on HGA shows. Okay, yes. Okay. Well, how about something
But
in the
Christy
public
practiced
domain?
so long for his part.
I know, I know. I'm disappointed too. But
I mean,
perhaps we
really,
could
it's
do
the
something
audience who
like
suffers.
in a spoken
Really?
word version of it. Oh, another. Get on with the bloody show, Nate. Okay. The atheist community of Austin is apparently not a platform for our karaoke. Um, the atheist community of Austin is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the separation of religion and government and promoting positive atheism. We're going to take a pass on the karaoke, folks. I'm sorry. I wanted to do it, but Today, instead, we're going to be talking about the grim history of Valentine's Day. We're going to be talking about some V-Day traditions around the world. We're going to be talking about Valentine's Day blues. For some folks, it isn't always the happiest of days. And finally, to round up, we are going to do one of my favorite segments, which is Shit Internet Apologists Say. And this is a great one. You guys are going to want to stick around for this because it is Just Say No to V-Day. And
Mm.
as with all of our shows, links to today's topics and the news we discuss are available in the description below. And a reminder that if you want to come into this show prepared, you can check out our nonprofit's Facebook fan page every Friday night. Me, personally, will be posting a list of the articles ahead of time. So if you all want to read up, want to come in ready, do it up. We are going to get started with our first segment, and I believe, Laura, you are going to take us in. What do you got for us?
Yes, yes, yes. So we are literally starting off the first segment at the very beginning, as in the very historical beginning. So in this first segment, we look at several different articles from anywhere from the NPR to Smithsonian. So look them up, but there's several different articles on the history of Valentine's Day, which spoiler alert isn't always what people think it is, right? So we think of it as the celebration of Saint Valentine's that makes us think of saints, which makes us think of Catholicism, which makes us think it's all clean and sanctified and beautiful and holy and great. And it's not, which I love. So Valentine's Day has a history that's been here, there, and everywhere, but observances of what we would now call Valentine's Day started back in Rome. And if anybody knows anything about Rome, they sure loved their sex back then. So it was a very sexy, very fun, very spunky holiday. Now, obviously, it wasn't called St. Valentine's Day. They had different names for it. So at first, the Romans celebrated to honor Juno. I'm gonna just butcher these names, but Juno Fructifier, which is a queen and a Roman goddess. And so it was as a fertility celebration, and then it became the feast of Lupercalia, which again was to
Nailed it.
It
honor
was
the
nice. Yeah.
awesome, awesome. But it was to honor the god of fertility, Faunus. So these celebrations very early on were about love and hooking up and having fun and fertility. Um, and it wasn't until later that it got kind of, I would say, kind of formalized into greeting cards and chocolates and teddy bears. So very, very interesting histories. I'm not going to go and review the entire history. I think you guys should all go read the articles yourselves because they're very fascinating, actually. But I think that in terms of the history, we all three have a lot to say on it. And I'm sure I'll put in plenty of my 2 cents, but one of you 2 put in about the jump in the articles between when it was all about sex to when it was all about greeting cards. So, I think it was was it Nate that said that?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanna start this segment off with that conversation because that was fascinating to me.
Yeah, well, that's what I kind of noticed that in both articles, it kind of jumps from early Roman, like skin whipping S&M orgies, and then we skip ahead to Pope Galasius, which sounds more like a transformer than a cleric. But apparently, this pope around the end of the 5th century, or sorry, yeah, 496, and he condemns this rowdy, drunken party, like, because as Catholics are wont to do, they have to stifle healthy human sexual activity.
I
And
mean,
then
yeah.
in both articles, we sort of skip from there all the way to the early Enlightenment, and then when it sort of becomes this chocolates and cards kind of thing, and I'm like, I want to know how we got from skin whipping to cards. Like,
What
I
was all
feel
the
like,
good stuff in the middle?
Like,
yeah.
what
I mean, there
happened?
had to be
Yeah.
something in the middle there. I mean, I realized there was, plague and the Dark Ages and the 100 Years' War and all this other stuff. But I mean, people like to get down, so I feel like we're missing part of the story here.
Yeah, I mean, in so much of this, we're missing the story, right? Like, I'm sure we'll get a little bit more into it, but like the history of Valentine's Day is so messy and unclear. You've got so many different holidays that have kind of been like grafted onto each other. And this like semi ancient tradition is kind of just like trying to borrow older roots. It's like every time somebody sort of installs a new holiday, they're just sort of like grafting it on to the one that's already been there. So, even the histories that we do know and sort of the things that we kind of think we understand about the origins of this thing are just up in the air. I mean, the legends around St. Valentine's and some of the things that I'm sure the viewers might have heard in their, kindergarten class or whatever else, even those things are not super verifiable.
Right, they're very nebulous.
No,
Yeah,
yeah,
so
the very beginning of the article says how nobody knows who Saint Valentine actually was, but apparently there were two different people that were executed on the same date, and that's the
different
origin.
yeah.
Is these Romans were actually celebrating that this guy had been killed off?
Yeah.
Like, now that
Or
that
well,
is
the
that
but
is a
the
rough
but the
start for a holiday. Sorry, Laura,
but the
go
holiday
ahead.
already existed. It was kind of more like that was when the names were appropriated, and that
Oh
to me
yeah,
doesn't make any sense, right? So, it makes sense to me that the holiday was sort of taken and adapted because cultural appropriation and diffusion happens all the time, and that's what I
Sure.
really wanted to get the most out of this was that and in answer to Nate's question, like, you take a holiday that one culture is celebrating, but then you have this sort of, Christian whitewashing that now needs to occur because there's standards now that people have to adhere to, right? And so when you would ask, like, "Well, what happened in between?" It was like, a lot of oppression of people's and
yeah.
suppression of people's sexualities and their freedom of choice and expression. That's what happened in in those years in between. Um, but I do get confused just like you 2 do with, so you have this holiday now that has very clearly Roman roots, and it's celebrated in other cultures in different ways, as we're gonna talk about in future sections. But you take it and you give it a saint's name, but the saints, like Nate said, that are connected to it are connected in such a s odd, sort of circumstantial way
Mhm.
that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, neither one of them it just doesn't it's almost like, well, we need to do something with this holiday because people are celebrating it, so we need to take it and we need to
Right.
Christianize it. So here's these guys that we killed on the same day. So, well, let's just
So that'll work, right? Yeah, which
Yeah.
is
right.
why I desperately wish that we actually had a cohesive narrative that we could like present to the world so that we could get busy actually getting into the history of this thing. I'm not particularly concerned about it in one sense, but I just would love to be able to pull back the bullshit mask that's been put on top of it. There is such a rich and lovely history of the Catholic Church taking indigenous and pagan holidays and traditions that they don't like and then just like attaching it to a dead saint so that now we in 2022 get to have all of these narratives about how Christianity has been the primary driving force behind all modern civilization for thousands of years,
Mm.
and that Christians have always been persecuted, and that when a Christian is martyred, it becomes way more important than whatever the hell else the local population had been doing, and also just serves to feed into this Christians will always and have always been persecuted narrative.
Mm.
And it's exhausting to me. Like, I would love to be able to dispel that with something a little bit more like neat and tidy than, well, we've got these legends and we're not really sure, but there were some dudes and there were some festivals and now we're here.
Yeah,
Here's some
so it's
chocolates.
interesting. Yeah,
And here's some
have a
chocolates.
greeting card. No, it's interesting that you talk about that about the main Christian holidays as appropriating other cultures' holidays, and it kind of, even though it's an atrocious thing that they did in terms of bastardizing those holidays and changing them, it also makes sense from their perspective why they would want to do that. But I
Oh
went
yeah, like
in
from
reading
the
this
oppressor's
article.
point of view.
Oh,
Great
it totally
job.
is
Great
legit.
job.
Yeah. It's right? But, so I went and I looked up Christian holidays, and any holiday that wasn't a result or an adaptation of a pagan holiday, I'd never heard of. Like,
Yeah.
they were various saint
Oh,
days
yeah,
or,
yeah.
like, and I'll make sure that they're included in the show notes, but it was like there was a whole list of holidays, including saints' days, and there's one that's uh, something about, like, pain, like, causing yourself pain or suffering, like a suffering day or something like that. I'm assuming it has something to do with Christ's suffering. But the only holidays that I recognized were all appropriated, like you have Christmas, Easter,
Mhm.
Valentine's Day, right? And, and then you look at other religions, and what I thought was interesting is, they do it to an extent, but, like, you look at Jewish holidays, for example, and they have a clear Jewish history.
Mhm, mhm.
Oh,
Right,
yeah.
and you look at Muslim holidays, and they have a clear Muslim history, and so on and so forth, and they don't tend as often to appropriate other, cultures' holidays. In fact, they tend to look down upon that, like, that tends to be very, against the religious teachings. So I find it interesting that one of the ways that Christian tradition has survived and become so rich and so vibrant in our society is by stealing it from other cultures'
Yeah.
holidays.
Yeah. Well, and we'll talk more about that idea, I imagine, when we get to our final segment tonight. But I think it's really important that we start to wrestle as a culture with the reality that our history books have been rewritten by Catholic priests for literally thousands of years at this stage. And that's a terrifying, terrifying notion. Like, as a sex therapist, and a lot of the things we talk about on secular sexuality is, well, why do we all of a sudden have all of these new genders? And ever since we started letting gays into the military, now everybody's gay. And the reality is, if you're wondering why there were no trans folks before 2004, it's because they've been in hiding and their histories have been destroyed over and
Mhm.
over and over. And I
Mhm.
think on a certain level, we generally kind of know that. But I can't help but feel like every time we talk about Easter and Christmas, and now here we are looking at Valentine's Day, without meaningfully understanding that that is an aspect of the tradition that we're celebrating, we tend to just continue to like Christian whitewash over some like very meaningful. I didn't think this phrase was going to come out of my mouth, but some very meaningful genocides. Like, these are important parts of human history that we don't really get into.
Yeah, you're kinda reminding me, I think it's a Napoleon quote, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like, "I'm not afraid of how history will look at me because I'll be the one that writes it."
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah, pretty
Sure.
much.
kinda what's going
Yeah.
on here. And then when Laura was talking about, Christian holidays, and I was trying to think of one that wasn't Easter or Christmas, and I'm like,
Right.
the one that popped into my head was St. Crispin's Day.
Which I've never heard
And
of.
Yeah, I was gonna say I
the
don't think we'd do that here.
the only reason I know that is because I'm a history nerd, and that's the day that the Battle of Agincourt happened, when the French were severely trounced by the British, and it was St. Crispin's Day, and That's the only other Christian holiday I can think of, and I remember it for reasons having absolutely nothing to do with Christianity.
Well, I
So
mean, here in evangelical Texas, July 4th, Independence Day is kind of generally considered a Christian holiday. So there's, there's that influence trying to graft itself to everything. I mean, the God virus might be retreating in a lot of ways, but it's still very much running rampant across our planet.
yeah, absolutely. The one thing that Christianity has done so well is to it's like the blob, right? It spreads across and then it amalgamates all these different cultural practices into its own, and then claims that hey, we invented it, and
Yeah.
what's more, we're proud of it, and how dare you try to take it away from us like we took it away from wait, what? So, what? No,
But
no.
if you think about it, it totally makes sense because that is a survival tactic of that
Oh
specific
yeah.
religion, and different religions have different survival tactics. But I mean, if we go back to, I know everybody's hating on Dawkins these days, and I get where I disagree with him as well. But that's one of the ways in which he makes a really good point: is religion is a lot like a gene, and it's programmed to survive. And Christianity specifically, it survives through rapid adaptation, whereas other religions in general stay pretty consistent over the years in terms of their beliefs and doctrines and practices. And Christianity is like left, right, up, down, and everywhere.
Hmm.
And but it's an incredibly successful survival tactic for that specific religion.
Yeah, and Daryl Ray's book, The God Virus, paints a pretty compelling picture of what you guys are talking about, is how it actually acts
Yeah.
as a virus. It performs as a disease, and it's a disease of the mind, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
keep
we'll adapt as needed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I kind of wanted to be. You guys were talking about how they were amalgamating all these traditions. And I was like, man, to be a fly on the wall in that focus group in the Holy See, where it's like, okay, so we crucified these guys, and so right now there's young men with skin whips going around whipping women because they think it makes them more fertile. How do we get this to work for us? Ideas? Throwing it to the
And
floor.
just throwing it out there, the women were like lined up around the block. I mean, this
Yeah.
was not something. I mean, this was entirely consensual, just so the audience knows. Um,
Yeah, I was reading this wondering, like, this sounds sort of like misogynistic, is, these lecherous young men going around with skin whips whipping women, and I'm like, well, this sounds pretty, Bronze Age. But the more I read about it, the more I was like, they
it's
were
more like a
into
swingers
it.
party. I mean, this is really good stuff.
They were
Yeah.
into it, and I am
Yeah.
down. I am there for it.
So
Absolutely.
it's funny you said that because, and Christy made a comment earlier about Christianity and how it kind of changes and morphs our holidays and how we celebrate stuff. And one of the things I was thinking of is like, if Christianity hadn't gotten a hold of this holiday, if we were still, or even gotten a hold of us, period, if Rome had not converted to Christianity, what would America be like today? Besides not being
Mm.
America, what would it be like today? And all things being equal, and assuming we were still somehow created, right? Imagine if we were still celebrating based on Roman pagan practices. Like, can you imagine what Valentine's Day would look like today?
Be
Right? I was like,
fucking
man, that
awesome
would
is what
be
it would be.
that
Yeah,
would
I mean,
be.
like as a sex therapist, I would be out of work. So I mean, I guess that's kind of
Oh,
a
I mean, I
nice thing
guess
to
there's
think about.
that. You
Well,
can
you
go
you
into
could
business
always go
doing
back to
the
your youth
butchering of the.
pastor, yeah. Sorry. Uh, Classic. Well, we probably should move on. We do have some rather juicy topics, but
Mhm.
final thoughts from the panel on the history of Valentine's Day.
Just another case of Christian whitewashing, and remember that mindfully, but have a good time. It's here we are in 2022.
Yeah,
Wise
I mean,
words,
I
Laura.
I definitely gotta echo Christie's, like, if you wanna embrace it, embrace it, like, have fun and enjoy the holiday. But most holidays and most traditions and rituals, histories are really fascinating. So if you don't like the 3 articles, or if you're not one that enjoys reading, YouTube it or something, like, look up the history of Valentine's Day because it's actually really quite interesting how many different loops and turns and twists and how much intrigue is in the history of Valentine's Day.
Hmm.
Yeah, and sort of like what you guys were saying, I think that with the rising amount of people that don't have a religion, right? The nuns, the people who have no
Mhm.
religious association, and as that sort of wanes, we're gonna have more opportunities to reclaim some of these holidays and shape them the way that we want to. And I am there for that because some good old whipping. I'm down. I'm down for that. I think we ought to bring
Let's not
that
kill
back.
an
Let's
animal to make it happen. Let's use some sort of synthetic or cotton.
Right, right. Well, obviously, we're not gonna skin a live goat. We'll
But this
we'll
is
use
tradition,
something
Nate.
else.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
This
Let's
is the
we're look.
tradition that we just invented to put on top of somebody else's
that we've
tradition,
been
and you
doing
need to
forever that we
honor
haven't
and respect that.
Very well, very well. We'll
Appropriating other
focus group it.
cultures is my culture, Nate.
Ooh, that should be on a
Spoken like
t-shirt
an
somewhere.
American. All right, so we're gonna move on. But folks, before we do go on to our next article, we want to thank you for your support. As most of our loyal fans will know, we made it to 10,000 subscribers in the waning months of 2021. So if you look above in the chat window, we can now do fundraisers. But we are not done. We're still growing. We want to get up to the 20K. So get the word out, like, subscribe, click the bell. Feel free to share these links with your friends, whether they are members of the secular community or not. This is great content, and you don't have to agree with us. Share this stuff with people that don't agree, because I actually like to have dialogues with people I don't agree with. That's how you learn stuff. So have everybody Christians, Jews, atheists, join us every Sunday, 3 p.m. Central Time. Doing so will help us grow the channel and bring you more amazing content like this. And if you can't catch us live, we forgive you, but you can check out the Atheist Experience Network. It's a YouTube channel. You find all the Atheist Community of Austin shows in podcast form, audio only. Subscribe at tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. You've got episodes of the Nonprofits. We've got a little show called Secular Sexuality that comes on Thursdays. Truth Wanted is on Fridays. And then Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience on Sundays. Don't miss a single episode, folks. But I am going to take us in to segment numero deux. And it is Valentine's Day traditions around the world. So this article is coming to us from odysseysunlimited.com. And it's just a sort of brief look at how other countries, 30 other countries to be specific, how they celebrate Valentine's Day. And reading through this, I noticed that a lot of them are kind of the same. It's, chocolates and gifts and
So
rather
much chocolate.
yeah. What is it with chocolate? Like I've
I
I've
think it was
never had much of
orchestrated by like the chocolate industry.
Yeah, right? It's like Hallmark and Nestle got together and they're like, "How can we torpedo this thing? How can we make money off this?" As it is, it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's like every country with predominantly white people seems to have the pretty much same thing with cards and chocolates and fucking. So, I mean, I'm not against it, but, give me a bag of potato chips too. But I did try to come up with some of the more interesting practices, and I'm sure we're going to get into some of them. Um, but another thing, and I want to draw everyone's attention to this before we get into some of the more wacky, is that I was reading at the bottom of these articles the comment section, and the comment section was filled with not. I know what you're thinking, Christy, but it wasn't
Never
those.
read the comment section.
Well, aside from I made $5,000 in an hour and a half at such and such and such.com, there was a lot of folks there that were saying, I'm from this place and I've never heard of this practice. I'm from Germany. We never do this. I'm from South Korea. We never do this. So I kind of wonder if some of these are just kind of maybe ancient traditions or if just recently fallen out of favor or something. But let's get into it. I'm going to throw it over to you guys. But I want to start off with my personal favorite, which was the Welsh tradition of carving an elaborate wooden spoon and giving it to your honey. So this year, Instead of flowers, why not give the gift of cutlery? You'll be on their mind every time your lover has some Campbell's soup. Brought to you by Hallmark and Nestle.
Yeah,
Laura?
Hallmark and Nestle.
Oh, that's sweet. And if you're not into spoon carving, or if you're just not that talented or artistic, there's always Thailand, and they celebrate Valentine's Day by doing extreme sports such as skydiving or bungee jumping, including things like underwater weddings. So, if you're a little bit more on the adventurous side and a little bit less into the arts and crafts, dude, I'd hit Thailand's.
Better fit.
Yeah. Although I also like Argentina, where they just celebrate for a full week of
Yeah.
cards and candy and gifts and romance. Like, I can take a full week of that.
Yeah, and they like dress up the streets. I was looking at pictures of it, and it's like all dressed up. It kind of looks like a Christmas without snow. And I was like, hey, I'd be down for that. Christy,
Yeah.
what did you find?
Yeah, well, we touched a little bit on sort of the ubiquity of chocolate everywhere, and I guess that's probably because of the like pseudoscience bullshit around chocolate being an aphrodisiac. I guess I'll say to the audience, in case you were not aware, eating chocolate is not going to make you horny, unless it does, which is great. If you feel horny, then you are horny, and I guess that's what counts. But there's nothing magical about the chemical compounds within the product. But I really thought it was fascinating that the nation of Ghana, which is one of the world's like leading chocolate manufacturers, has just full on embraced it. They don't even necessarily have like a Valentine's Day type tradition. They just have February 14th as like the big chocolate day because they have so much income around all of that. But I was also really fascinated to look at how a number of different countries try to grapple with the idea of like Valentines for children. You know, my parents always thought that it was kind of weird that like a bunch of kindergartners would be expected to give like little cards to their classmates when this was meant to be like a romantic or sexual sort of holiday. And it seems that that is sort of a question kind of everywhere because the different ways that different countries try to address that or try to make it a family holiday while also wanting it to be something that is about like adult romantic love. I just found really, really interesting. That was to me kind of the highlight of the article.
So
Do you guys do that down in the States? Do you do because I'm Canadian. I'm curious now that you brought it up. Do you do the like passing around little Valentines in school where everybody's
Oh
got an
yeah,
envelope
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the whole
it's like
ordeal.
that
Yep.
Simpsons episode where Ralph Wiggum he's like, you choo
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 choose
choose.
me.
Yeah,
You
that's a
guys
real
do that
thing. We
too?
do that.
Cards with
Everybody
little
That's
gets
messages
awesome.
on
one.
them. Yeah. No, I think it's interesting what Christy brings up because Valentine's Day growing up for me, my mom would always leave us in the morning at the table. She'd set the table and like little plates and stuff like that with a little breakfast treat like a Danish or something or a donut. And then she would give us each a little bit of candy and a little toy, right? And everything was all done in pink and hearts, and the candy was normally like those little heart candies with the words on them. But
Mhm.
it's interesting. So she, like, even outside of the school system, she incorporated Valentine's Day as a like sort of child friendly show my love to my children kind of way. And then I passed that on to my children the first few years. And we haven't done it in a long time, but um actually even as I say that, I take that back. Every year though, we do buy them one of those little dollar heart-shaped boxes that has like 3 or 4 pieces of chocolate in it. Every year we get each of our kids one of those. So, yeah, it's interesting how you can take a holiday that is in the adult world, it revolves a lot around sex and romance. But then there's also this sort of like cutesy, fun, very PG, innocent side to it too. So you're
Which is
right. It's
all
kind of
valid.
yeah.
But it's just it's interesting to watch the way we can't have a holiday that's around like love and romance and sex without also
True.
having like a kids table. And I get that. Like I appreciate that like my 13-year-old, you know, is not going to be oblivious of some sort of quote adult holiday and there's nothing wrong with wanting to include them, but our relationship with sex and sexuality is so culturally bound. We
Mhm.
assume that it's biological and that like our sense of shame and humility and these things are sort of innate. But just this simple list of Valentine's Day traditions to me very clearly says that the way we talk about sex, the way we talk about sex with kids, and our sort of comfort level with that is very different around the world.
No, you're
Oh yeah,
absolutely
absolutely.
right. And you talk about like this list and how all the different cultures approach the holiday or a romantic holiday because not all of them are Valentine's Day. Some occur in the summer. Um, but how different cultures approach it differently. And you do have the ones that are very much more romantic and sexual and let's enjoy this and get sensuous with it. But then you also have a lot of cultures on this list make it very innocent even for the adults, right? Like you have cultures like China that where there's couples who exchange gifts. It's not so much about like romance in the sense of oh, I like you over here, but we're not together or anything like that. It's more like, oh, if you're a couple, you exchange something. And then you have other countries that don't celebrate it at all. There's sort of like a passing in Israel. They don't celebrate Valentine's Day, but there's sort of like this passing acknowledgement that romance is a thing. And they tie it together with what they call rebirth and new beginnings, like whatever, however you want to interpret that, right? So they sort of give a barely a nod to the idea of sex and romance. So yeah, even between cultures, let alone between age groups, you have quite a variety of um, ways to acknowledge a romantic holiday or a holiday that revolves around romance and sex.
Sure. Well, which got me really curious about what homosexuality or gay relationships or gay celebrations of Valentine's might look like around the world. And in trying to Google that idea, I was just kind of gently reminded that, like, oh, okay. So, yeah, America's got some concerns, but at the very least, we acknowledge the existence of homosexuality, which is a nice thing that we try to do. There are still so many places in the world where there is certainly no opportunity for Valentines in same-sex couples and things like that. The most interesting article I could really find on that idea was just documenting the first gay marriage in a number of different nations. And I mean, America, we're just 8 years into that experiment, which is,
Mhm.
depressingly recent, but still ahead of many, many nations around the world. I guess just taking a quick moment this Valentine's to spare a thought for all of the queer folks around the world that are not able to celebrate or acknowledge that relationship.
We are very lucky to be where we are. Myself, a little bit luckier because we up here in the enlightened country of Canada had marriage equality back in 2003. And if I could briefly share a quick anecdote, I remember looking for a card to give to my partner, and they were all like clearly from a woman. Like, like there was no
Oh
representation
no.
there whatsoever. But last year I actually found one that was clearly it was, to my darling husband sort of thing. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was clearly same sex partner geared greeting card. And I was like, oh wow.
Yes.
I actually
I feel
I actually
seen.
found one. I don't have to
Nice.
pick the least feminine one anymore. There's actually one that sort of, is more masculine and suits me a little bit better. So that was cool to see a little bit of progress, I
Mm-hmm.
thought. And I also liked how um in some other countries it's not necessarily so weird because of the approach they take. One that I really liked was Estonia. I don't know if you guys saw Estonia, but there was Sobrapev, Friendship Day. And so it's like
Yeah.
single folks and family and friends all exchange little small tokens of appreciation. And it seems a lot more inclusive than, us over here in North America, perhaps.
Mm.
And they've also got, and again, I don't know this to be true because in the comment section there are people saying, "Oh, I'm from Estonia. I've never heard of this." But apparently in the article that there's a love bus, and I don't know if
Ooh.
it's a Volkswagen van, but it's a love bus where single
It's all
people get
hope.
to go on, and it's sort of like a Estonian speed dating thing. That was pretty cool.
That's
Estonian
neat.
speed dating, among other things, would make an incredible progressive rock group. But
At the
I
very
Hey.
least.
I was interested in the traditions in Bulgaria, where they celebrate something. I guess that this article is sort of saying is like Valentine's Day, in that they have Trifon Zarazin Day, which is a celebration of the grape harvest, and kind of yet another example of a like local indigenous holiday that then got renamed after a dead saint, which I just love that sainted martyrs are sort of the whitewashing over so many of our like indigenous cultures.
Yeah, absolutely. There was another one I liked that was, I can't remember the country. It escapes me. I didn't put anything down for it, but it was like, this was traditionally the day that birds got married. And so if you wanted to see it,
For
you
what
had to
day?
walk outside in the snow and you could see birds proposing to each other. So, they're sitting, which I thought was just absolutely adorable and really cool. Like,
That is
come on.
pretty sweet. I like
Who
that. Yeah.
who doesn't want to see birds proposing
Celebrate
to
a
each
bird
other?
marriage, sure.
Yeah, right? Like, I mean, some birds are monogamous, right? I think geese are monogamous. I don't
Actually,
know.
yeah, there's several species of birds that are monogamous. What's interesting about that is not only are there birds that are monogamous, but within animal species, there's also polyamory and cheating, right? So they
Mm,
have monogamous bird couples where one or the other will stray. So I just think that that's interesting because all of these concepts that we think of as human concepts, you can pretty much typically find them in the animal kingdom.
We ain't nothing but mammals.
Yeah.
yeah, we're not that special. That's true. Another one I liked was South Korea, because South Korea has an anti-Valentine's Day. Did you guys see that one?
Yeah, was that the one with the big group weddings or I can't remember.
No, that was the Philippines. The Philippines has
Philippines.
like
Okay, look
the
at you having them all memorized.
government-sponsored
Right?
mass weddings. Yeah, yeah.
I'm
But no,
impressed.
South Korea has anti-Valentine's Day in April, and they call it the Black Day. And people basically celebrate being single by eating
Ooh,
noodles in a black sauce. Which I was just like, hey,
that
way to
is
fight back,
interesting.
Korea, right?
Yeah.
Not
No,
not
I like
only are
that.
you
Yeah.
including the single people, but you're actually having an event just for single people, which may end up in less single people. You never know.
It tends to
You
work
never
that way.
know.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I just thought that was really cool. Was there any other wacky Valentine's traditions that stuck in your minds before we wrap it up and move on?
Got all my big ones.
Yeah, I don't know if there were any more necessarily wacky ones. I think we kind of hit them. But one thing that I noticed was like cultures just fascinate me the way that there's overlap and that there's differences, right? So
Mm,
a lot of cultures focused on things like flowers. Several took place in the springtime and it was more about renewal and that sort of sense of romance is tied to the renewing of flowers and like it's very common to tie fertility to the springtime. And so a lot
Mm.
of different countries did
true.
that. Lots of countries with the chocolate, like you guys said, but what was really, really cool is that, there are so many different ways that countries celebrate, and we only had a small list. I'm sure that there are countries that weren't represented on this list. But it just kinda shows you that, like, we think of Valentine's Day as our holiday, and, like, other countries either don't celebrate it or those kinds of holidays might not be on their minds, but they are. Like, they call them different things, they celebrate them on different days. But things like, fertility or love or romance, that's kind of on everybody's mind. Like it was pretty typical. So it was neat to see the different ways in which um, all of our cultures do things so differently, but then there's also so much overlap and so much similarity. I thought that was
Mm.
kind of fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, just gives you a better sense of what the human animal is and wants and
Yeah.
needs.
Yeah, it's like the convergent evolution of culture instead of
Totally.
biology. It kind of works the same way. I thought that was really cool to see. I was more interested in the wacky ones, but it is interesting to
That's
consider
because
that
you're wacky.
it is because I'm a little wacky. Maybe it is, but I think we're gonna move on to our next segment here. But before we do, we're going to take a brief break in our conversation because, folks, if you didn't tune into the other ACA shows last week, we are going to give you a sneak peek at what you may have missed.
Clearly enjoying themselves and having fun, but it's only from the point of view of the shoulders, and that's all you can see is their face. I thought that was super, super interesting. It's a beautiful agony, I believe is what they call it.
Just not interested.
I think you're pushing an agenda there that's harmful to children in some cases.
I'm pushing an agenda for damn sure, and it's that trans kids have rights.
The conversations that were in sexual education concerning sex and the conversations that I were having with my friends were completely different. And they were wrought with misinformation.
Like whenever I hear people doing the preacher voice, I wonder what they sound like when they're going through like the drive-through at Taco Bell. That's like how they sound.
Number 2,
I would like a
no lettuce
pasta and a chalupa.
You'd stamp your foot and be like, "No, Mom, I don't want to go do the dishes." Well, tough. You're doing the dishes anyway, and that's your job for the next 75 years.
That's right. It's been mandated to you.
Oh, those promo reels always kill me.
You know what's funny is I have been missing shows left and right. Like I used to catch just about every show live as often as I could. So anytime I do one of these where I see an interstitial, it reminds me like, oh my God, this is what I'm missing. And so it reminds me to go back and catch the shows that I've missed.
Yeah, it just reminds me that I need to be more careful about what I say on air. Because there's, at least once a month, there's a moment of like,
actually.
Oh God, did I? And we're going to like rebroadcast that one particular clip over. Okay, let's do that, please.
No, that's happened quite a few times where I'm like, they caught me saying that, huh?
Hey, it's working for you, Christy. I think you're just trailing Dan and Matt as far as total appearances, and. I tend to think it's probably because you're the hosts that actually have your own shows. The other shows are kind of rotating panel, but you got some gems there. So I would say, don't change a thing. Never change a thing.
You do you, boo.
You do you, Christy, because it's working for you. And I think we are going to throw segment 3 to you, sir. What have you got for us, Christy Powell?
Yeah, so this is a article in the Irish Times, Valentine's Day Blues. Don't worry, you're not alone. This is something of a self-help article, and I found it to be a little bit curious. It's not bad advice, and I don't disagree with it, but it takes a good amount of time to do something which is very important, which is just to validate the experience of people who are perhaps not having the best time with this holiday. Whether because you are not in a relationship or because you're in a relationship that isn't working the way that you feel it's supposed to. It's just always important that whenever we are celebrating and getting excited for something, that we make a little bit of space for the fact that that's going to have the exact opposite impact for a meaningful, like non-zero percentage of our culture. And I appreciate that we made some time to have this segment and kind of acknowledge that, and then maybe even talk around some strategies for how to be well on a difficult day like this. What was y'all's impression of it?
I really wanted to hear your opinion on some of these points because I was reading them, and I have to admit that I kind of thought a lot of it was bullshit. And I'm like, I can't wait to hear what Christy has to say because he's actually a mental health professional. And so maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe I'm not. But I really want to hear what you guys have to say. See if we land in the same place.
So it's interesting that you point out like the parts of it were bullshit. Because to me, this was one of the most important and meaningful articles of all the articles we're covering. Not because the information is perfect or good, but because it touches on a subject that we don't tend to think about in terms of any specific holiday, which is those that are suffering during that holiday or those that are going through hard times or bad times, or that in the case of Valentine's Day especially, the holiday itself has a negative impact on them.
Sure.
Right? So I was very, very 50-50 about this article in terms of the information, and I hope we get to get more into that. But I did want to kind of throw out there that this one was meaningful in the sense that it really hit on something that we can tend to take for granted.
Yeah, which is a really important point, right? That these things can be very challenging. And, Nate, you were talking about South Korea, but I certainly know people that have anti Valentine's Day parties and these kinds of things. And, that's great. Like, have fun with it. It's holidays are all made up bullshit anyway. That's not a bad thing. Money is made up. The United States of America is a made up concept. So if we are
Story,
going
yeah.
to just make up a holiday, that's totally fine. The fact that we have sort of all come together and said that this holiday, this particular day on the calendar is arbitrarily this, is fun because it's nice to be able to like share things. Holidays bring us together in a lot of ways. But whenever we try to bring people together, inevitably there are folks who are going to feel excluded, and it's worthwhile to spare a thought for them. So, Nate, I'd be really curious if there was anything that stood out for you as bullshit. But I want to just maybe broadly say that my impression, vaguely, of the advice in this article was like, well, yeah, sure. I mean, okay. Like there wasn't anything that I was like, well, that's not true. It was a
Right.
lot of stuff that like is true, but just saying it in the form of a maxim doesn't make it meaningful. And I think whatever advice we might throw out during this segment, whatever advice you might garner from this article or anything else that you might read about how to perhaps care for yourself around Valentine's Day, ultimately the thing that becomes important about it is that you do it, because there was so much advice in this article that was like, well, you should try this and you should try that, and I can just imagine a million people pulling it up on Facebook and going, oh, that's a good idea, I should do that, and then not doing that
Not doing
thing.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
important to do the thing, and that's maybe like the most important mental health message that I can offer anybody ever, is that so often we're like, well, I get it. I get it. Like, I don't need to do the meditation because I know the meditation. Or, even if you do sit there and like listen to the meditation, you need to do the thing. Be mindful, be present. And if you decide that you're going to spend your Valentine's Day home alone, sitting in the bathtub, great. But like actually do that. Put down your phone, like actually enjoy that bath. If you're going to go out to dinner, be present with your partner. Don't worry about whether or not this is the best, most fanciest, most romantical Valentine's Days of Everest. Just be present and do what you can to enjoy the experience. But Nate, I mean, let me get back to you. Was there something that stood out to you?
Several things. Several things.
Sure.
Before I get into it, I just want to clarify that having some extra visibility for those of us who might not feel included on a day like this is a good thing. I'm totally behind that. I just don't know if this article put it in a way that is constructive. So the first
Fair.
thing that stood out to me was I kind of the way that this article was framed before they actually got into the advice, it kind of gave me low-key incel vibes. But they've got a line in there, like a woe is me line about, well, the neighbor's dog is the only affection I'll be getting this year. And then there's a phrase about relationships are never as good as how they are in film and pornography. And it just seemed like it set the whole conversation off in a spirit of pity, which I don't think is helpful. Did
Yeah.
you guys get that at all, or am I the only one?
That was
no,
my very first note.
yeah.
Laura, you go.
No, I was gonna say I got it, but I also found it very, and I don't even know if this is a word, like platitudinal, right? Like it felt like a bunch of
Yes.
platitudes getting thrown at me
Yes.
over and over again. So I think I love reading self-help stuff. I love the idea of getting stuff out there for people to absorb and read and digest, or videos or whatever. So I think it's all great. But this one to me felt a lot like a passing nod. It felt like, well,
Yeah.
we're going to kind of acknowledge that people are hurting at Valentine's Day, but we're not really going to get into the meat of it. We're not going to really get
Mm-hmm.
serious with it. And so one of the things, and I have it right here, it says, well, the answer is there's nothing wrong with you, right? And it's like, but no, literally there might be. Chemically, there could be,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Psychologically, there might be, and you might need real help. Or you might have just gone through a terrible breakup. So sure, there's nothing wrong with you as a person or as an individual, but that to
Life
me
could
just
still be
it's like
challenging, and
it
those challenges
glossed
are valid.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, before we get into some of the more, biochemical, actual real things that might be happening, you mentioned platitudes, and like I was
Mhm.
reading through some of this stuff, and some of these phrases, I'm just like, it just struck me. I'm like, this isn't going to help someone who's in pain or who has a real problem. Like, it's got phrases like "make the determination that from now on you're going to love yourself," or the mantra "I'm wonderful." Or the one that got me was "create a kinder universe around yourself." I'm like, is Deepak Chopra writing this? Like, this is just a
Yeah.
bunch of manure that's this guy is planted on the internet for us. The
I think
one good piece of advice I did think was
Mhm.
avoid negative people, which is good advice any time of the year, but I thought was the
Yeah.
best advice in this article.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like y'all are both kind of dancing around the most significant thing that stood out to me about this
Mm.
article, which
Okay.
is that word pity. You used it, Nate. Pity is when we look down on somebody below us and feel sorry for them. What the people who are struggling around this holiday really need is compassion. Compassion
Yeah.
sees the other person as an equal, and it's not just loving kindness, it's loving kindness that is directed exactly and specifically where it hurts. I mean, that you can go right back to those Latin roots. Like the word compassion comes from the idea of just being with the pain. And so
Mhm.
when you throw out some of these like mantras, make the determination that you're going to love yourself. I mean, yes, like do that. But I want to see that, and I want to use that mantra, and I want to use these phrases, and I want to make that determination to love yourself, not from a place of pity, not from a place of self pity, and certainly not from a place of being pitied by others. I want to do it
Mhm.
from a place of compassion, one that says,
Mhm.
like, yeah, I am going to make the determination to love myself. And, repeating that mantra repetitively could potentially be like a meaningful step in developing more self compassion and becoming a healthier, happier person during a challenging holiday or during a challenging time. But the way this article frames it and the way that it's discussed and the way it's sort of thrown out there like a platitude doesn't feel compassionate. It feels like
Exactly.
pity.
But you also have
Exactly.
to believe it. Like, you can't just tell someone, "Oh, just tell yourself you're fine," or "Tell yourself you love yourself,"
That's the
or say,
dismissiveness
"I'm
of
a
looking
winner,"
down on
right?
somebody. That's the
Yeah.
Yeah.
dismissiveness of
Yeah.
pity.
And when that person does so insincerely in hopes that, "Oh, if I just do this, it will magically change my mindset," but they're not doing it with true self-love, it's more contrived. It can actually make things worse sometimes where it's like, "Man, I've been trying so hard to love myself, and I just really suck at that too." Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's
Um
the trick of mindfulness for sure. Like, just saying the words is not going to do the thing. When you
Mhm.
say, like, I'm going to commit to loving myself, just saying it is not doing the thing. Committing to loving yourself is doing the thing, and that's what's so significant. And I think that's why this article reads or just scans anyway as so dismissive.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
that's what set it off for me was that it frames the conversation poorly and then goes on to issue platitudes with a bit of good advice sprinkled in. There's one more thing I want to get to, but Laura, go ahead first.
well, I was just gonna say, I think it is designed for maybe for people who are just kind of feeling down or are just kind of feeling a little off. Like this strikes me as a kind of article that reads, if you're having a bad day, here's some ways to handle your bad day. And I agree with it. Things like taking a bath or taking time to yourself or reminding yourself of the positive things about yourself. All of that will help if you're just kind of feeling cruddy. But what really got me was if you're really say you're clinically depressed, none of this is gonna cure your depression. None of this is
Hmm.
gonna help you. And reading an article like this, and thinking that these things are supposed to help when they're not can actually make you feel even more defeated. So to me, this read as the kind of thing that's helpful to sort of a surface level meh state, right?
Yeah.
To someone who's generally okay.
There's an
And not
insufficiency to it.
It's a bit superficial, yeah. I thought so
Yeah.
too. But to this kind of what I wanted to talk about kind of dovetails with what you guys are talking about with Christy saying do the thing and Laura talking about, you know, actual people who might have a real problem that they could get help for. The one point that it brings up is smile more. Fake it till you make it and smile more because this will release chemicals in your brain that will make you feel better. And I read this and I'm thinking, will it though? Like if I walk around grinning like an idiot when I feel bad, is that really going to make me feel better? Like I am seriously skeptical. So I did some digging and I actually did find a study from the University of Kansas that found that smiling more, whether it matched the subject's mood or not, actually was demonstrated to reduce stress, reduce blood pressure, reduce heart rate, improve the immune system. And I also found several articles that quoted mental health professionals that seem to agree with that. So, like, I have to say, like, I kind of thought this was a bit of snake oil, and I think I might be wrong. So, for all of my colleagues at work, if you see me walking around grinning like a moron when I'm really dead
he feels
inside,
like shit right then.
that's gonna be why. Like, how you doing, Nate?
Yeah, well, it's
Great.
kind of the
Doing
same
great.
thing that we've been talking about because telling somebody, well, you should smile more and your life will be better, that's pity. That's
Yeah.
dismissiveness. That's not
Yeah.
meaningful help. And to me, that's the danger of pop psychology. It's not that these ideas aren't potentially like valid or rooted in good research even. It's that reading an article that has like 20 great tips for how to be a healthier person is not going to actually get you to that place where you're meaningfully smiling more. You might read this article and you might say, well, I'm just going to commit to smiling more. And there could maybe
Yeah.
be some value in that, but you're not taking the important and necessary steps to actually change your life. And that's what would concern me here. Not that any of this advice is necessarily bad, but doing the platitudinal version of some of these tips is not going to get you anywhere.
That brings up a good point. And you said something like pop something. I can't remember. It reminded me of pop culture. And so I went and looked again at the source of this. It is Irish Times, but it's also just it's their life and style section. And so it's
Yeah.
just it's a journalist who writes on life and style, which means they basically could have zero qualifications in terms of mental health. And so that's actually really important for people to keep in mind is if you do have a problem, going to any sort of column section of any magazine is probably not the best place to get actual, real, legitimate, meaty solutions to your problem, right? Pretty much anyone who doesn't say see a doctor or talk to a professional, and that should be somewhere in this article. And to my recollection, it's not, right?
No, I don't think it is
Um,
at all.
it,
I don't think there's
yeah,
any mention of, hey, you might actually be sad for other
you
reasons.
might actually
That's an
need
excellent point.
professional help. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
we tend a lot to look for these really quick answers, or if it's written in a magazine or if it's posted on Facebook or whatever, it must be good advice. And honestly, this article doesn't have any meat behind it in terms of science or in terms of real methods that a therapist like Christy might use to actually break down what's going on with someone and help get them through it, right? So that's just kind of something to keep in mind is like this article is basically a fluff piece. And it could very well just be someone's opinion.
Bingo. Bingo. Yes. That this is what sort of stuck out to me too when I read this thing, and I'm like, is it though? Let's actually see if there are studies to demonstrate this and show. And I'm sure that our audience here at the Nonprofits, being the critical thinkers that you are, would read this article and think, is there any substance to this though? But it could be dangerous to someone, you know, who maybe doesn't look behind the curtain, so to speak. But Christy, what was your big takeaway from this article as the resident mental health professional on the panel today?
Well, really just that same idea of pity. Because
Okay.
so many of these tips I think could have some real value in somebody's life,
Okay.
but the way that they're presented, the lack of protein in these ideas is just really concerning. Like, it prevents people from meaningfully engaging with some of these practices, and that would just really be my concern. Like, it's not a whole grain article, like it's just the the cheap stuff.
I love your use of metaphor. That was
Yeah, I love it. The
absolutely stunning.
protein. Yeah.
That's great. Laura, what did you think was the best advice in the article? Before we move on, maybe we'll just touch on that. Best advice.
Well, I would have almost thought it was the title, which is Valentine's Day Blues. Don't worry, you're not alone. Right, like that right there was
Okay,
actually
Yeah.
the best. But
fair.
then in really thinking about it and letting it sink in, it's not always the best, because how often do we hear, "Oh, you're not alone. Don't worry," as though that's supposed to make everything better. Like, somebody else lost a spouse, therefore I'm not alone. Somebody else like got in a car accident, therefore I'm not alone. It doesn't necessarily make people better. So upon reflection, I think what I got the most positive out of this was the intent, which was to acknowledge that Valentine's Day can be very hard on people, and to attempt to give some advice for things that people can do to alleviate that.
Hmm. Okay. Well, that'll be our takeaway then, is that the intent was there, but this was the white bread of self-help articles. But yeah, it was an interesting read. I encourage you folks to go have a look at this article and think about some of the assertions that it's making and some of the recommendations it's making, and sort of dig behind the surface and see if there is actually any substance to these. Because actually, as Laura said, this could be somebody who has no idea what they're talking about. Very well could be.
Well, and like
But
Christy said, like, it is good advice, but if you need more help, don't think that this is all inclusive. That's my
Mm-hmm.
yeah, absolutely. So we are going to move along to my personal favorite segment that we do on the nonprofits, and that segment is
Shit internet apologists say.
Yes. I am so
Laura.
excited to get
Take
to
it
introduce
away.
this one. Yeah.
Juicy one.
So, you can check out on becomingchristians.com this article titled 10 Simple but Powerful Reasons Christians Should Not Celebrate Valentine's Day. So if anybody thought that this day was a specifically Christian holiday or that it was biblical,
Womp
what?
womp.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to disappoint you, but no, it's in fact not. But this gentleman, Mr. Joshua Infantado, gives the 10 reasons why he thinks that Valentine's Day should not be celebrated by Christians. Now, I have a lot of problems with that, because I think people should be able to celebrate whatever they want, and I don't think we should be mind controlling each other's behavior. But
But
he has
that's why
10,
you're not a Christian.
which is why, I mean, there's
Ooh.
that, yeah.
Where's the lie?
True point. But so he goes into different things. He breaks it into 10 reasons, but when you really, really look at each of the 10 reasons, there's a lot of redundancy to them.
Does
There's a lot of
Four.
reference.
Does he though?
I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
I think he needed a nice round number, and 10 was it. But they all boil around the idea that Valentine's Day has pagan roots, which we discussed in segment 1. Nobody's gonna deny it. Like, that's pretty straightforward and not controversial. But the point that he makes is that it angers, hurts, and offends the G-man upstairs. So, gentlemen, what do you guys think about Valentine's Day hurting God's feelings?
Oh,
Well, to your point earlier, Laura, he mentions that there are actually only 7 annual festivities found in the book of Leviticus that God actually does approve of, and you have not heard of any of them.
Christmas ain't one of them.
Christmas is not one of them.
What?
Yeah, which is just frustrating, and we've been talking about this notion of the God virus and the different ways that Christianity works to stay relevant and works to insert itself between you and the life that you want to lead, making it invaluable to you. And one of the ways that they do that is over and over again in this article, he says, well, lots of people do it, but Christians shouldn't. The majority does this, but Christians shouldn't. And it really feels like the goal here is just to differentiate Christianity from the rest of the world by being so special as to not celebrate these pagan holidays. And it's worth noting that if your like major primary message is just because the majority does it doesn't mean you should, you might be a cult.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
And the ironic ignorance of saying that just because a lot of people think it doesn't mean it's so. Like, you're a Christian. There's an
Irony
awful
much?
lot of Christians. Like, do you not hear yourself
This is
talking?
uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's like there's so many
Who's
of
gonna
them.
tell
but-
him?
Yeah, right? Oh man, that was like the first thing I was just like, oh my Lanta. And before we go on, I just want to point out that reasons 1, 7, and 10 are literally the same thing.
Exactly. the
God
same.
doesn't like pagan traditions, and it's like, guys, again, who's gonna tell them? You did. Funny story. I was actually talking to my son, who's almost 14, and was talking to him about Christmas and how the Bible actually discourages folks from decorating Christmas trees. It's in Jeremiah, and he's like, "What, really?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like Christmas is a stolen holiday, like every other Christian holiday, and that actually is in the Bible. Do not decorate your trees." Da, 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 da. And he's like, "Is it really?" Yeah. So I looked it up on the internet, and then I'm like, "Go fetch that Bible over there. But go ahead, open it up, Jeremiah," and then he reads it, and he's like, "Wow." And his little mind was blown, but it's like these guys are so not, they lack the self-awareness, and it's killing me as I'm reading this article. It's killing me, Smalls. It's killing me.
Yeah, I mean, it broke my heart because I certainly hadn't read this article from a place of faith. I didn't read it when I was a Christian, but I'm confident I read similar things. And
Mhm.
it breaks my heart to think that there are people out in the world and that I used to be a person out in the world that would read phrases like this and be okay with it. My favorite quote is, speaking on the topic of Valentine's Day gifts, it says, "Women in general are very emotional. If they don't receive a gift on Valentine's Day, they feel unloved." And it goes on to speak specifically about women and their feeling of entitlement. And I just want to say to you, if you are watching this and you are not part of the atheist community, welcome. I'm glad that you're curious, that you're exploring the world. You don't necessarily need to land with us, but I hope that if you can hear my voice, that you are not the sort of person that wants to live in a world where we write articles that say women are very emotional and entitled about their Valentine's Day presents. Fuck that.
Oh no, it even gets worse because it says if you don't get them something super, super, super fancy, then they're gonna be jealous of their friends. And if you do get them something super, super fancy, then they're gonna be like all high and mighty about it and above everybody else and feel like, they are somehow better than others. I mean, it gets really freaking
Oh, yeah.
shallow.
Bitches be
and,
crazy.
This
and
is like
offensive.
1952 levels of misogyny in this
It's
article.
pretty. I mean, I almost gave it to him with the title. Reason number 8: Valentine's Day leads to negative emotions. I almost gave him just that one. Not that it should mean that Christians shouldn't celebrate Valentine's Day, but that it was making a good point until I freaking read it. Because we were just talking in the last segment about mental health and how Valentine's Day can have a very negative impact on certain people depending on not just their mental state, but like their whether or not they're in a relationship or not and things like that, right? So it does result in some negative emotions. But when it goes on to talk about women in the most derogatory way,
That's-
it's pretty disgusting.
Yeah,
I
and there's a little bit in there. Sorry, Christy, I'll let you speak, but I just want to get this out. The little bit about how Valentine's Day is an excuse for unwed couples to have premarital sex and leads to more abortions. And I'm reading this,
said
I'm
Unwed
like,
no
couples don't need
couple
an excuse.
ever.
what?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, look, it's
where?
Valentine's Day. Let's
Yeah,
break the rules.
what 22-year-old was like, well, I mean, God's asleep on Valentine's, right? Like that's how it works. But no, my other favorite quote was around that same idea of like premarital sex and the notion that sexual immorality brings pleasure, but it doesn't last. And setting aside this gentleman's notion of what constitutes sexual immorality, aka like probably a Tuesday night for me, I am baffled by this notion that it brings pleasure that doesn't last. Like I know that a true love of Christ brings a hope that springs eternal or whatever the fuck, but tell me any emotion that lasts indefinitely. Tell me about any pleasure. Tell me about any positive experience that is eternal at all ever. I
Period.
mean, that notion, that idea that like sexuality is frivolous and unimportant because it's transitory. Well, let me tell you about the whole rest of your entire life. It's pretty goddamn transitory.
But you're hitting on
Gather
some
around,
really
kids.
strong Christian messaging, though. The whole idea that
Absolutely.
anything transitory is therefore value is not valuable. And I think it can be argued the exact opposite, that the transitory nature or the fleeing nature of whatever that emotion is or experience is
Mhm.
does give it value,
The
right?
moment is
But
all we
that's
have. Yeah.
right. But that
I mean,
messaging
the
is
past, the
very
future, those are
vague.
just fictions that we tell ourselves. Like the moment is all we have.
Literally, yeah.
That's so brilliant. And um the part that he sort of contradicts himself here, because he's like, he goes into I think it was reason 5. Don't celebrate Valentine's Day because St. Valentine's is a myth. So again, leaving aside the who's gonna tell him? It's
Yeah.
Jesus should be too. But he gives this direct quote, and I know that you guys had this in your notes too. Dead people are dead. And I'm like,
I did pull
wow,
that out,
dude,
yeah.
that is one
But
sanguine.
it goes on to say they don't anymore have the ability to help the living.
Yeah,
Just
and then
icing.
it's like, isn't the whole shtick of your thing that people aren't actually dead? And then he
Right?
quotes the Bible. He quotes John 3:13 that states no one has ascended to heaven but Jesus. It's like, dude, skip 3 verses ahead to literally the most well-known Bible quote possibly in the world. John 3:16. and like, do you even read your book? Oh man, this was a mess. What did you guys think? Do you guys, I know you guys saw the dead people are dead thing, but yes, please riff on that for a bit.
Well, and we've mentioned again and again the pagan roots of Easter and Christmas, but the fact that he is like coming after Valentine's Day without acknowledging the existence of Christmas trees and Easter bunnies and some of these other things, it's just baffling, the misinformation. And I think that is my biggest takeaway, is that there exists a world where you can so thoroughly cherry pick your information and so thoroughly insulate yourself that these ideas can make sense.
You just made me think, like, I wonder if he's one of those guys that say things like put Christ back in Christmas. Like,
Yeah.
I just wonder.
Almost certainly. Almost certainly. Yeah, the gleeful ignorance that basically all the Christian holidays that we've heard of are literally borrowed from the peoples you converted. Like, if you were to take the modern Christian holiday calendar, right? If God were to take his calendar and submit it in like essay form to Deity University, he'd be expelled. They would kick him out. They'd be like, no, that's Ishtar.
Like, this
dude.
is a mess. We can't even.
Yeah.
We can know.
Yeah, be like, maybe like they would run out of red pens in heaven. We can't have that.
Okay, so what really bothered me the most about this article had actually nothing to do with the specific wording in the article or specific points that he made. what bothers me is that, from my perspective, religion is a very effective cultural tool for behavior modification and for mind control, right? And so this article specifically demonstrated to me that the controller, right, the presumable like head of the religion or founder of the religion, um, doesn't even need to be the one exercising control, right? Once you have this body of people that are really bought off on this idea, they begin behavior controlling and mind controlling each other, right? So here's this guy who's a Christian, like undoubtedly, and he's writing this article. He's not the founder of Christianity. He's not the grand master of all things Christian. And yet he's the one dictating to people whether you should or should not be celebrating Valentine's Day. And there is this strong sense of entitlement that because you are of X faith, you now can speak on its behalf. And so this guy is going out and facilitating and perpetuating the very mechanisms that are keeping people trapped in like this sort of loop. And I just think it's fascinating that they're doing it to each other.
The self-perpetuation of that multi-level marketing scheme.
Oh, right.
Absolutely brilliant. This whole article, I mean, folks, if you're listening to us riff on this, please, if you read one article, just if you're having a bad day and you need a laugh and you tuned into the nonprofits, go read this thing, because it is truly the most manure that I have read. And that's including the self-help one. The self-help one was at least well intended. This is just manipulative, twisted, ignorant crap. And I'm going to leave it at that. But if you guys have any final thoughts before we wrap, please go ahead.
I guess I'll just say that this article touches on, and actually several of the articles that we talked about, all like to take a little quiet moment to point out the commercialization of this holiday. And I don't entirely know what to make of that, or even necessarily how I feel, but I do think it is fascinating that seemingly every year we have to have all of these news segments, and we have to have all of these talking points about how there will be $20 billion spent on Valentine's Day gifts this year, and at Christmas we spend $30 billion, and all of these notions. And I just don't get why the anti-commercialization is such a big talking point here. Like, nobody seems to care. We're all spending this money, and whether or not we should and how we should be relating to our economics, like, there are meaningful questions to be had here. But I don't know. I guess I'm just a little bit tired of like the annual lip service paid to the notion that this is just a greeting card holiday and it was just invented by the greeting card companies. Like, that's somehow less noble than stealing from a bunch of pagans.
Well, and so that is really interesting to me because we do get very ridiculous with our holidays, but it is not the industry that drives us, it's us that drives the industry. And
Exactly.
so if everyone stopped buying like loads of Christmas
Just
shit and
don't
loads of
look.
Halloween shit and loads of Valentine's shit, guess what? Those holidays would become very small in terms of like spending, right? So we need to recognize that you're the one perpetuating the very problem that you're complaining about, right? Because you're buying the greeting cards and the chocolates and the teddy bears
Yeah,
for
nobody's
the
changing
wife
their
so that she can
actions.
feel
It's
better
just
than
a
all the other
weird
wives.
talking point.
Yeah, it's
I
very
think it gets
bizarre.
back to what you were talking about earlier, Christy, is the whole persecution complex. And it's
Yeah.
just kind of like, well, this thing
They've
used to be
stolen our
ours. And now,
sacred holiday.
exactly. And now they've taken it from us. And I think even in this article, it mentions something about secular people celebrating the holiday now, and how they're all spending all this much money. This just used to belong to us, so we got to take the power back. It's just it
They
just
don't
gets
even know
back
the
to
true meaning of Saint
right.
Lucetia's,
Yeah,
bacchanal.
someone took their
You-
baby rattle and they're very pissed off about it.
Something tells me if the average American knew like the exact true meaning of the Roman holiday, that they would be embracing it even more so. It wouldn't change people's minds.
Yeah, probably
Quite
fair.
possibly. Quite possibly. And something tells me that, our audience would almost certainly be more interested in the Roman
this
origins
taking a skin of
of
an animal and like hitting a woman with it. Like, come on now, people. It sounds like a lot
yeah.
of fun.
Yeah, a little bit of light S&M never hurt any. Well, maybe it did hurt anyone, but if they're into
But
it, hey,
consensually.
right?
Sounds like the nonprofits audience could use a little secular sexuality. Thursday
I
nights at
think
7.
Thursday nights at 7. You can catch folks such as Christy, Laura, myself, Puck. Who's on this coming week? Oh, I guess we don't know yet.
Yeah, no, still working it out.
Oh, right. But yes, we are on every Thursday, and yeah, we are. Hopefully, y'all can join us on there because it gets pretty wild there on Thursdays. We've got a saying in the crew that it's always Thursday somewhere. So if you liked what you saw today, please tune in on Thursdays and catch more of this content. Also, before we wrap up, I do want to get out some of our other social media outlets. Most of our nonprofit hosts are in the atheist community of Discord. Maybe not Christy, because he's a little bit of a Luddite. Sorry, Christy.
I'm in it. I just don't know how to use it. I'm there, though.
Do you remember like the old days of like ICQ and Messenger stuff?
I mean,
do you remember
MSN
that?
Messenger, AIM, oh yeah, I was here for that.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's literally the same thing. It's exactly the same thing,
but with way more fancy buttons.
Yeah.
I think the problem is that it's not more complicated, that it's actually that bare bones simple structure. But there is a great community on Discord, folks. And if you'd like to touch base with us, you can go to tiny.cc/ACD Discord, and also on a little app called Facebook. I don't know if any of y'all have heard of that. Tiny.cc/FBNP, Facebook Nonprofits. Also, if you would like to support the show, you can do so by becoming a patron at tiny.cc/PatreonNP. Oh, yes. And if you find yourself shopping at Amazon, you can support the atheist community of Austin by shopping at smile.amazon.com. Select the atheist community of Austin as the beneficiary charity, and be sure to use that link to help out the ACA. Jeff Bezos won't miss those pennies, and we would really appreciate it. Also, give us some feedback. If you guys liked the articles that we talked about, if you'd like to suggest articles, suggest things you want to talk about, the best way is to suggest it in the Discord. But if you'd like to email us, comment us, send all that stuff over through the emailings at the nonprofits at atheist-community.org. So, folks, Valentine's Day. What are your final thoughts about the holiday? About what we talked about before we leave our fine audience?
Well, I just want to encourage everybody this Valentine's Day to take Dan Savage's advice and fuck first. Don't wait until after you've had a big romantic dinner and a night of drinking.
Oh, yeah.
Fuck first.
Yeah. And then if you want a round two, go for a round two.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Dessert will
but that
be
way, if
there.
you get all filled up on steak and shellfish, you won't feel bad or guilty or like you're missing
100%.
out on something. Yeah.
That is absolutely wise advice. And Christy didn't say it, but you might want to fuck first, because if you have a little bit too many of the wobbly pops, you might get the whiskey dick, and then it might be a little bit of a. Yeah.
There's a number of good reasons.
There's so many good reasons to fuck first, eat later. But folks, that's our show for this week. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we will see you all next time.
Watch The Atheist Experience live Sundays at 4:30 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTAXP and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callaxp.